right, well, I don't know if this is recording or not, so we're just going to go with it. All right, so today we're going to talk about documenting, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit different fashion than I've talked about it previously. First off, if you know me, you know that I am a fan of documentation, right? I think it's super important if you're being bullied, harassed, or experiencing any discrimination in the workplace. Documentation is what I think is your best friend. But the problem becomes with documentation, just like anything else, is do I have time to do it? How do I do it? And then what do I do with it after it's done? Because one of the things we think when it comes to documentation is we think that documentation is the key to getting what is happening to us in the workplace stopped. So if you're being bullied, you think that documenting will help your organization see the light and that will stop. If you're being harassed at work, you think the same thing. You'll take your documentation in and somebody will see the light and they'll get that to stop. Well, 9 times out of 10, first off, nobody wants to see your documentation or your record of what's happening because they want to play, again, for lack of a better term, they just want to play stupid, so to speak. If they don't see it, they don't have to address it, and they don't have to acknowledge that what's happening to you is real. And secondly, is especially when it comes to workplace bullying, often by the time you come in to report, the dynamics of the culture, of the organizational culture or your group culture have switched, and the person that you're reporting to has my side bias, or they have changed how they view you because of the group dynamics related to shifts when bullying happens and people go along to get along and all these things. And so by the time you go into report, you are already seen as the problem. So even if they would look at your documentation, they still wouldn't see it in a way that portrays you as the one being abused. They would view it as you're the one causing the problem. Okay? So first off, I think if you're in a place where you're being bullied, you're being harassed, or whatever's happening, you have to stop looking at or trying to find a solution that involves somebody coming in and making what's happening to you stop. Because 9 times out of 10, that doesn't happen, because 9 times out of 10, the problem of bullying existed before you got there and nobody has done anything, and it will continue if you decide to leave. And what I really mean by that is then bullying is embedded in the work culture and in the organization. And as a result of that, everything is skewed and totally dysfunctional, and it works against you when you're the one being abused. And so you have to have a mind shift and say, okay, the likelihood that somebody's going to come in to, for lack of a better term, save me and is slim to none. So your documentation is really key in how you manage this abusive work environment going forward. And so your documentation helps protect you. So if you, for example, have a boss who is a constant rethinker and changes the rules on you, then you can use your documentation, for example, to say, you know, Bob, you said 2 emails ago at 4:25 that you wanted me to do ABC. It's now 5:06 p.m. and I've left work and now you've changed it again. So, do you want me to do what your email at this time said, or do you want me to do what your email is saying now? Right? So you can use those things that you've saved as a way to say, hey, Bob, which way is it? you said this, and then you said this. You decide which way you want me to do it. It's up to you. Okay? And so it's important, again, that you use it like that. That you say, okay, when you have somebody who's gaslighting you, if you're in a meeting and they say something that's not true, you should always refer back to your evidence and your documentation to counter their gaslighting. Now, the problem with that is twofold. Okay, it takes a lot of effort and energy to document in a way that it's usable, right? Because then you're documenting all sorts of things, damn near everything, if you really want to be honest about it. And secondly, so that takes a lot of time and energy just merely to get everything down. And then secondly, how do you retrieve those things? And if you know anything about me or you've read any of my work, you've probably seen the picture of my Rubbermaid container that was jam-packed full of documentation. And I also had digital files, right? So every email that somebody sent me, I saved, and later when I left that place, retrieved, exported out of my email into my own personal documents, okay? So that I would have those in case anything, would happen after I left, okay? But how do you retrieve those things? So for myself, I worked at a place like 8 years. That's a lot of documentation. One, to collect, and two, to organize and have it in a way that's retrievable. Right? It wasn't retrievable. Did I have it? Yeah. Could I have found it if I had dug through? Probably, but it would have taken me a significant amount of time. So your system for documentation up front has to be one that's really, really superior, right? So yes, if you haven't, I do have a documentation toolkit which does two things: talks about best practice and also had an incident log. Okay, an Excel spreadsheet which had all of the boxes that you need to have a solid record of what's happening to you. The problem with Excel, first off, I'm not an Excel lover or Google Sheets, okay? I am better at it than I was, but it's not my favorite. But you can do a lot of things in an Excel spreadsheet. You can just go on and on and on and on in your Excel spreadsheet. You can add another sheet, another sheet, and another sheet. So you could do that for 8 years. But again, it's not, and you can search an Excel spreadsheet, but it's not really that user friendly. So, and I did look at my Excel and my spreadsheet that I had the other day, and to be frank with you, it's a bit complicated. Lots of categories for bullying and types and all these things, not necessarily user friendly. So even if you have a decent system, which I think the Excel spreadsheet is pretty good, it's better than what most people have, okay, but not ideal. So what do you do then? Okay, because most of the time, again, what happens is nobody is probably telling you to document. HR is not going to tell you to document. Your union rep isn't going to tell you to document. Your supervisor isn't going to tell you to document. You probably have a friend, or I had a good mentor when I started working in bully culture who told me to document. And so as soon as I got into that culture, I documented, and I have a social work background, so I know what documenting means, what good documentation looks like. So I did have a few skills at my, that worked in my favor. However, again, you have to have a system where things are easily retrievable, where you know where stuff is, and you have to know what to use for your documentation, because it's not just a system that you use for reporting. It's so much more than that if you use it right. Because again, what other experts around workplace bullying are telling you to do is document and to use that for reporting. Again, 9 times out of 10, when you use your documentation for reporting, you are the one who gets hurt. You're the one who gets fired, not the bully. It's you, because the system is already skewed against you because of my side bias and dysfunctional group dynamics by the time you get in to report. So, and so then what do you do with your documentation? Most experts don't say what to do, okay? But I'm your friendly workplace bullying expert, and I'm here to tell you exactly what to do with your documentation. It is your silent witness. It is what you can use to take back your power and to take the wind out of the bully's sails, okay? That's what you can use it for. So for example, my previous example is when Bob is telling you, do it this way, then do it that way, and then do it this way. What you can do is say to Bob, and you can attach each of his emails and say, Bob, you said this at this time. You said this at this time. You said this at this time. Please inform me which way you'd like me to do it. Okay? So I had a supervisor who was a problem, a massive bully. But he was a switch it. So he would think of something in a meeting, like in a team meeting, and he'd say, oh yeah, Jan, I want you to do XYZ. Okay, never bring it up again. 9 times out of 10, that bully would never remember what he said. And so 9 times out of 10, when he would tell me to do something, I wouldn't do it because I knew that was just him saying something in a meeting and he would never remember. Okay, well, of course, there's always that 1 out of 10 times where he would remember what he said. And then he would say, well, do you have this report that I asked you to send me? Right? Okay. And so then if I didn't have the report, what I would generally do is come up with something that fit his description that he was asking for in my email. Okay. The problem with that person is they have one idea in their head. They don't remember it. So they either don't come back, and maybe you've done all these things, right? So when I started working for him, he would say something, then I would do it, not realizing that he wouldn't remember and would never come back to that again, right? So then I adapted to him, okay, and realized that, maybe 1 out of 10 times I'm going to get dinged because I don't have that thing. So he was one who always switched the criteria or changed the rules. And one of the things, again, I didn't do when I was working for him, I would do now is make sure that I had every requirement down. And when he changed the rules, I'd use his own words against him. So you can use your documentation to stop gaslighting. You can use your documentation to stop bullies from hurting and harming your reputation, and you can shut them down by your documentation. The other thing that's really important when it comes to documenting, again, and this is where, yes, the Google Sheets or an Excel spreadsheet, you can put formulas in your columns and it can tell you certain things. You want to know things that are happening to you. You don't just want to have a record of it. You have to have a way that says, what does this mean? Right? So if I had to go back and say, I was mostly bullied this way, okay, and I have the records to prove it. I can show you that when I started in, 2012 and I left at whatever I left, this is the amount of bullying I experienced, verbal abuse, swearing, cyberbullying. I couldn't give you specifics, okay? If I had to say, I would say I was mostly cyberbullied and, verbal stuff. So a lot of gossiping and isolation and, rumors and that kind of thing. But that's just on my memory. I don't have any specific data that actually proves that. And yes, in the Excel spreadsheet, if you ran a formula for every column, it could count some of the behaviors that I was tracking in there. But what's so important about documenting for you as a victim of workplace bullying is that you understand exactly what is happening to you, that you understand that 9 out of the 10 faculty meetings or team meetings or weekly meetings you've had, that 9 out of 10 times you were yelled at and cussed at by Bob and his minion, right, or a bystander also was engaging in that behavior against you. So you know that 9 times out of the 10 when you go to this meeting, this weekly meeting, that you have 2 people in there. One, your primary aggressor, who is Bob, and then you have Betty in there who's working with Bob, and you know that that's a high-risk time for you. So what does that mean? Well, it just means that those are high-risk times, and you need to prepare for those. So you can then should be able to track where you're being bullied at, who is doing it, and the type of bullying that you're experiencing. Is it gaslighting? Is it verbal assault or swearing, right? You're going to handle those things differently depending on who's doing it, how often it's happening, and the type of bullying that you're experiencing. So your documentation is not about reporting. Yes, you can organize it and submit it in a way that can show the pattern of what's happening to you, but it can also show the pattern of what's happening to you, so that you can intervene in a way that's more effective. Now, I'm not telling you that you're the problem or that, you did something to be bullied. What I'm telling you is that in order for you to take back control, to take the wind out of the bully's sails, is you have to know what is happening to you, when it's happening to you, how it's happening to you. You need to know what you're doing in those moments and if that's working or not. And then if it's not working, you need to figure out some other way, right? So you can use the information to change your own behavior in a way that harms the bully, so to speak, right? By not letting them gaslight in you, that hurts them, but it gives you power. Because what happens when you're being bullied is you feel powerless because they're making you feel powerless. It's seeping in because you're starting to think that what they say about you is true. Nobody's taking you seriously. And again, when you have the entire organization thinking that you're the problem, you begin to internalize those things. What your documentation does is it says, these things are really happening to me. And I was just sitting in the meeting and suddenly Bob and Betty piggybacked and started calling me names and harassing me. I didn't do anything to deserve that behavior. Here's how I responded. I got defensive. That made it worse. The next time I go into that team meeting, I'm going to try neutral statements, microscripts, and I'm not going to get defensive. And I want to see if that helps reduce my vulnerability and it changes how they're responding to me because I'm not fueling their bullying, right? So again, it's you taking back control and taking it away from Bob and Betty, who is the aggressor and the bystander who's trying to get ahead. And so that's the importance of your documentation. And so and how you then can retrieve it and understand things to also then be able to respond to Bob in an email or in a, meeting setting where you can say, well, this is what happened and this is the facts. On this day at this time, this happened. When you have those things written down and you respond in a factual, objective way, then it takes away a lot of power by the bully. Okay, at the end, it puts you back in the driver's seat. Now, one of the things when it comes to documenting okay, I recommend a couple of things, especially about yourself. I recommend when you are filling in the details, the incident details, okay, so ideally you want to log or document every incident of bullying that happens, meaning you have kind of a start and a finish. You can have an incident that has multiple bullying behaviors in it, but you want to report every incident. So a team meeting might be an incident. Okay, so that's probably going to be a lot of details that you might have in there about what's happening to you. And I can give you some shortcuts and some ways to record those details without missing any of those key bullying behaviors. Okay. Um, so you want to log those incidents, right? When it started, everything that happened in between, and who was involved, the location, the context, etc. Okay. In those details, I encourage you to include your own responses. Okay. For example, I'm in a team meeting. My bully Bob gets up, gets close to my face, yells at me, okay, calls me names, whatever, you know, clenches their fists, you know, does some shrugs and some body language things and gesturing. My response is to stand up and get close, right, to Bob and say, you know, Bob, I can see that you're upset. I'm wondering if we should, you know, cancel the meeting, and when you calm down, we can all come back and get together and finish our meeting. Or if you need to respond to any of us, you can send that in a group email. Okay, so in the details, okay, I'm going to put Bob came into my personal space, okay, very close to my physical body. Bob had his, you know, fists clenched. Bob said, quote, as many verbatim comments as I possibly can, okay? And I might say something like, Bob continued to swear at me for 2 minutes and 40 seconds because I timed it. I looked at my watch, and it was 5 o'clock when it started. I looked back, it was 5:02:50 or whatever. I stood up, okay, and then I'm going to say verbatim what I did, right? In the details, you want verbatim, I did this, they did this. What I don't recommend, and a lot of people do recommend, is that you put the impact it had on you. I don't recommend that you put that in your incident details. Your details are the facts, ma'am, just the facts, what happened. And the reason I don't encourage you to put the details of how it impacted you in your documentation is that, first off, if you've been at any place for a long period of time, you're going to have a lot of logs. If you start documenting those on day 1 or day 2 or 6 months in. And so if you wanted to then submit your documentation to, you know, have it organized and have that organized in a way that you could submit it, you would then have to, it would be my recommendation that you would go in and take out any time you say something like, you know, I did have somebody in a meeting charge around the table at me, and I'm going to tell you the impact that it had on me. I was scared shitless to go into my workplace. I was scared of her. Even the sight of her made me kind of shake and shiver, okay? If I had put that in my notes, okay, that again, and submitted that to an HR that already thought I was the problem, that is fuel for my firing. Okay, so you want to put down the details and include what you said and did. You do not want to include the impact, because you're already the one that they think is a troublemaker. And if they read that and you submit that or you give that to them, then that's a major problem. Because they're going to look through your documentation to find those things. But if your documentation, your incident details, just have the facts, well, that's even better, because then they can't use your documentation against you. So you have to be very clear about what you're including in your details, and to make sure that anything that can be skewed and looked poorly on, like, I was scared shitless, right? I went to the after that meeting, I went to the bathroom and I had to, put my hands on the counter and put water on my face because I was scared and I didn't think I was going to be able to go back in and do my job. Those are things HR will 100% use against you. So you have to document and be careful about what you're saying. So anyway, so all of this long talk about documentation, why is it so important? Well, you need a system, right? So I want to go back to my documentation toolkit and my Excel spreadsheet, because one of the things I'm working on right now is this workplace bullying docu tool, okay, which is essentially my Excel spreadsheet in an app format, which makes it easily accessible to you, because you can access it on your phone or on your tablet or on your computer, and it has everything you need in there. Yeah, my Excel spreadsheet, basically, in a glorified, in a much better fashion, with all of the boxes that you need, right? It has a drop-down menu for bullying types of behaviors. So for example, yelling/verbal, swearing/verbal, gaslighting/emotional, and then you can pick all of those from that list in one incident, because what we do know for a fact is that when you're being bullied, lots of bullying behaviors happen in one incident. You can put the location, okay? We have, just a drop-down menu for some basic locations, and then of course an other. You can put who was there, witnesses involved. It includes the date and the time. It includes incident details, any additional notes that you want to talk about. So for example, if you want to put in the incident details, this happened, and then you want to say in your notes or in a journal that's not related to your documentation about how it made you feel, then if you need to submit it, you can take out the notes, right? And so the point of the docu tool is to include everything you need right at your fingertips in a way that is easily accessible to you. So you don't have to think about getting out your spreadsheet. It's just right there. You pull up the docu tool, you fill it in, you hit submit, and it goes on to a place. You have your own space. I don't have access to it, okay? And it's your personal space where you have your document. You have your document incidences of workplace bullying. I'm working on an extract all or a download all. Okay, it has a search button, so you can search your docu tool incident logs. We're hoping to have a file upload so that if you have evidence, you can say, yes, I have evidence. Here's the evidence location. So that you know that if you go in and you have a documented incident on 5/2/2024, you can go back into your docu tool, pull that up, and look at, say, oh, the evidence is here. So you know where it is, that you have it, and the location. So it's much easier for you to much more accessible to you. Now, we're working on some other, some other things too. How can we, can we pull it all together? So we may not have all the bells and whistles on our first launch of our docu tool, but we'll continue to improve with your feedback. The most important thing for me for the docu tool for you was that it was private and secure, and it was easily accessible so that you could pull up your incidents, you could search them and figure out what's going on. And so I think I have the security and all of those things down. I don't have all the bells and whistles that I want in there yet, but that's what I'm working on. So if you really have something that you think would be beneficial for the workplace bullying docu-tool, just leave a comment and let me know. Because again, this is something that has not ever been done. I don't think there's any docu-tools out there that that I know of where it comes to helping people who've been bullied log and document what's happening to them. Okay. And I think that, and again, this tool is not so you can report. Yes, I hope it does help, help you report and do all of those things. The thing that I think is most important is that you can really figure out when and where and who is bullying you, and you can plan your, you can strategize a plan of attack that helps you and empowers you and disempowers bullies. Because I think a lot of times when we're being abused at work, our main focus and goal, and rightly so, I know this was mine, is getting somebody to stop what's happening to you, right? I wanted somebody to come in and stop the bullying. And that's what should happen. And you can still work on that goal. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, as my dad would say. So you can work on your goal, and this docu-tool is going to help you get your documentation in order for a better system of documentation. And then secondly, you can also use the docu-tool, okay? So the walking is trying to get it to stop. The chewing gum is managing what's happening to you, okay? You can do both of those things at the same time, and the docu-tool is going to help you do that. So let me know if you're interested. I'm still working on some of the, inner workings of the docu-tool. I have a lot of it built and done. I have a lot of testing and things to do yet, but if there's anything in relationship that you think when you documented what would be a good feature, let me know. And so, again, I'm not 100% sure when I'm going to be doing lives or if that's beneficial, I'm not sure. But as always, if there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. Anything I can do for you, please let me know.